Hello and welcome to another installment of the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. Once again, a little special because we have got some interesting episodes of Season 2 coming up, and we wanted to make sure that all three of us will be available for that, which has made scheduling a little bit more tricky and means we would rather wait a week or two to get everybody together and discuss rather than rushing the discussions and just having an incomplete crew. So, to make up for lost time, we are going to look at another installment of the Babylon 5 Shadow Wars mod. And this time around, as you can already see, we are going planet-side. It's been quite an interesting time for science fiction recently. With Helldivers coming out, there has been a surge of interest in Starship Troopers again, and for me this is interesting because this episode, this theme of sci-fi infantry going onto distant planets and having some adventures is obviously something that comes up in Season 2 as well. We have Gropos coming up, which is going to be an interesting discussion for us to have. And so to celebrate that, I thought we might look a little bit at the Gropos of this mod. Unfortunately, as always is the case, this mod is a little bit older. It's not the most stable, so while trying to record Earth Alliance footage from ground combat, I have encountered a few too many crashes to test my patience, so I've opted for a gameplay that at least is one complete mission from the Centauri perspective, and we are going to fight the Earth Alliance on the ground and get to see some Gropos that way. Now, we're getting straight into the battle here on a map that is originally designed as Yavin, but, well, a temperate forest for us is just as well as any kind of Centaurian human colony. And we are fighting as the Centauri Republic at the height of its power. You see here we have some heroes that we can recruit as well, which is going to be very funny because most of them are only swapped out for the Star Wars heroes of the game in name. So we might see some interesting displays from people called Londo Volari or such that don't quite fit what we see in the show. As usual for this mod, they do try to make this faction fit the portrayal of the show as much as possible, and for the Centauri Republic this means we are fighting essentially as a mercenary force. We don't see any Centauri on the field, we don't get to see the silly little Centauri telepaths, bodyguards on the ground with their golden armor. Instead we have generic alien mercenaries with little grenade launchers and proximity mines that we're deploying here, so we are fighting dirty and we are fighting with a lot of money. In this match I kept the voiceover lines for the different units on, especially because that's quite fun for some of the quotes that are given by the heroes. And just to translate a little bit for most of them, these are the grizzled mercenary lines of the Xan Consortium from Star Wars, so they are all talking about, as long as you pay me, I'm gonna follow your orders, which fits into the Centauri Republic very easily. Of course, we have some custom vehicles as well. Not all the units in this mod are repurposed, and the Centauri gets some very interesting walkers that to me always look like they're almost inspired by the strand base with many little legs moving forward at an unusual pace. And we also get some of the Centauri siege mines that we know from space very well. There are retrofitted versions of this that we will deploy on the ground. Once again, sparing as many Centauri lives as possible, fighting with autonomous vehicles. And it's a nice way of portraying also the technological advancement of the Centauri Republic, whereas the Earth Alliance, as we will see, is more or less a conventional modern-ish military with some special additions. The Centauri are straight up a science fiction, Star Wars-esque faction that fits right in here. The ground game mode of Empire at War was always, I feel like, the lesser of the two. It's many mods don't even bother including it, or if they do it as a secondary thing and spend a lot of time trying to make these maps a little more interesting, because it's a very box standard RTS experience that we have here. Add on that it's a mod that isn't perfectly balanced, and it's at points a little bit silly perhaps. Talking about a little bit silly, of course, that's also true for recruiting some shadows here. Interestingly enough, up until the Road Home release, the idea of shadow frontline soldiers was, to me at least, completely unthinkable in the Babylon 5 universe. Now that we know that it's very much a thing that exists with a little personal shields, this mod retroactively has become even more cannon-friendly than it already tried to be. We see here Boba Fett is deploying, which I think is this mod's version of Garibaldi on the ground. We have him apparently then under the control of Besser and doing his own independent thing, not fighting for 105. And, you know, with some heavy weaponry, he's easy enough to deal with. In this mod as well, the ground units, even though there's obviously a lot of love put into this, are a little bit more buggy, a little bit more unstable. We see the animations, the pathfinding for many of these units is a little bit off, but for a little bit of spectacle, it's still more than enough. Of course, all the units being deployed also by Centauri shuttles and such, so we can easily enough imagine that Londo had his flight experience in one of these as well. And we are putting together a really nice little task force, led of course by the creepy crawly shadows that we see here. With a game this age, of course, not the most detailed models, even by Empire at War standards. These are really rough ones, but I'm still impressed that they managed to get this spider-like appearance of the shadows in there at all. You don't get that many very special alien designs. Now, we are amassing our force at the center here, and as this is a Star Wars mod, we will have to contend with the fact that enemy factions have shields up, and to deal with those, we have Mr. Morden on the field here, who carries a set of pretty fitting abilities. He can make himself invisible, he can stun people very easily, which makes him a nice agent to try and sneak around, so let's have him take the lead here. The shadows themselves, we just saw it here, have the ability to suck life force from their enemies. We will have to see how well they do against some heavy firepower that the Earth Alliance is going to bring to bear. There we have them, the Gropos, the basic infantry here based on the stormtroopers of the Empire. But they do get their own little custom uniforms, and unfortunately against this alien force they had very little chance. Very squishy in this environment. The Centauri of course come with their own custom buildings here, the beautiful summer palace. I do like the idea that we are fighting as the summer residents of a house that has decided to go to war against the Earth Alliance presence here. And there we have it, the shield, which is powered by a power generator, so the bases in this game do have a little bit of a structure going on where you can try with subterfuge to get in there. And the frontal assault is gonna be a bit more difficult because this shield is gonna intercept any kind of artillery and long-range firepower that we have. So we want to get in there, we want to get into the close-range fighting. What we're going to see here as we enter this base is that the Earth Alliance, out of all the factions of this mod, is the most advanced when it comes to the ground combat, so they get full-on custom turrets, custom buildings, which makes this also a very nice battlefield for us to deal with. There we have more Gropos storming in here, and we will see how long they manage to take out against these hover tank and our weird little walkers, which are, I think, two separate walkers. They are just permanently stuck together and clipping into each other a little bit, but we can just ignore this and say it's alien technology that works well enough. With the enemy power going down, we can slowly start thinking about how to take out their actual command center. And now that the shields are down, we can think about longer range firing options. And one of the things that this mod does really well is include some of the iconic starfighters, so building a little air force on this map here is definitely an option. The Earth Alliance is sending some reinforcements in here, more Gropos, more heavy firepower, so we are going to buy the fighting retreat. Now that the power is out, we have a little bit of a window of opportunity to assemble another task force and go in there and wreak havoc. You can also see that we are getting bounties for every enemy unit that we kill. As with many things in this mod, they try to incorporate as many thematic upgrades and little inclusions here. And I think we are calling in a version of London Molari played by Bosk here, so we will see Molari handling a flamethrower and some plasma grenades. Not exactly what I ever imagined him seeing as, but if we have the options, we might as well bring him on the field. He's also giving us very interesting noises. Must be incredibly drunk at this time. You know, Mr. Morton is still hanging out here in the north, protecting this little drone, this little alcove with our resource production, so we have him build some towers here, and with the rest of our forces slowly pushing forward again to try and keep the enemy on their toes. The Sentry fighters, of course, the most famous and effective air force that the Centauri Republic can bring to bear, so we will try to get some of those here. They're incredibly squishy against anti-air turrets that are probably somewhere in the space, so we can't rely on them alone, but they will be a good coverage against enemy tanks and such to protect our little convoys going out here. We also have these like corvettes / transports and shuttles going on. In my experience, they are squishy enough that they don't make that much difference from the sentries, except the sentries come in threes, so they are a little more cost effective here. But to show them off at least, let's include them as well. Now, we've taken refuge there in a little bit of a bunker complex, but we will see now the Earth Alliance pushing out a lot of their vehicles, a lot of tanks, a lot of armored vehicles that will very quickly start harassing our positions all across the map here. So this level of map control we would have to properly defend, or contend with the fact that we have to start rushing into their base to properly take this presence of the Earth Alliance out. I do have to say, I love the portrayal of the Earth Alliance, especially here, but getting to see some Centauri forces on the ground is really, really neat. I wish we had gotten more of a chance to see things like this in the actual show, but I do remember from Season 5 and looking forward to it, seeing like some of the aircraft that the Drazi use and things like that. Just this hint that in the science fiction universe, even though we deal with the space station, there is a lot of stuff happening on the planets as well. People taking the Air Force and maybe even some naval ships into their little conflicts. Now we do hear and see already that a famous Sith Lord has joined the fight. Darth Vader is recruited as a hero of the Earth Alliance, which I don't even think he's named anything different in this mod to portray something else. I think that is just Star Wars stuck still in this mod. Of course, for a more, I guess, lore accurate, less unimmersive experience, you can always just disable the heroes of this mod and then you just have the Gropos fighting against alien walkers. Fans of Empire at War will probably also be familiar with Universe at War, which was another RTS of a similar style and era by the same studio that was set on Earth during an alien invasion, and I do really like how much the Centauri resemble the Hierarchy faction, the classic Aliens from Mars faction that had a lot of walkers, a lot of flying saucers and things like that. And just looking at the Centauri with the weird purple designs here and the little walkers running around, they are very classic aliens in that regard. So once you remove the Napoleonic uniforms, it actually made for quite an interesting War of the Worlds kind of threat. Now I'm very unsure whether or not the flickering that we have going on this map is attempting to be a lightning effect for the constant rainfall that we are having, or if it's just a visual glitch. It's about a 50-50 chance here. In this recording session, though, I have to say this was the most stable of the battles that I had. So even though I'm not the happiest with it, I'm taking this rather than a bunch of individual operations that crash halfway through. Although we might take a look at one of them just to see a little bit more of a close-up highlight of the Gropos invading a desert planet as they do in the show. Now we do have defended our positions across the map relatively successfully. The Alliance has fallen back to its lines, but even after destroying their shield a second time, it seems like they're pretty much dug in there, and without a coerced armored push, we will not have an easy time getting into their base. So rather than relying on drones and infantry alone, we should start building a bunch of the heavier hover tanks and maybe some more of these walkers, because they provide good ranged fire support with little missiles that they shoot. We see some thunderbolts coming in here. Of course, the Centauri Republic aren't the only ones that get to build a little bit of an air force in this ground battle. We do have a lot of anti-air turrets. This is one of the big advantages that the Centauri Republic has, building turrets that can shoot ground and air targets at the same time, so they don't have to specialize all that much. And now, let's see, we have a relatively lightly armored force here trying to go up against what looks like an entire armored convoy of the Earth Alliance, so this entire amassed force is disappearing rather quickly, I'm afraid. With two big hover tanks on the Centauri side, we can at least keep our infantry alive for a little bit longer, but for as big as a cannon is modeled, these hover tanks are not particularly good at range. They always want to stuck right on the enemy, so we will have to reconsider our options here to properly take out this enemy. We just got the message that the enemy shield is back up, but we have prepared now an orbital bombardment option. So with this and some bombardments via bomber wings, we can actually start thinking about doing some more substantial damage to the base once we get in there and take out their turrets, or rather their shield generators. This little concrete fortress is still under our control, that's securing our northern parts. And with that many heavy tanks on the field and not many tank options of our own, let's take to the skies and clear out their bases that way. It's going to be very good to retain some map control on here and keep our resources coming in, especially against these very heavy tanks, Earth Alliance hover tanks, that are the latest and greatest that the Earth Alliance has to offer. To take out these, we will want some fire support from the skies rather than trying to go toe-to-toe with them on the ground. And there goes our first wing, immediately starting to fire against them, and our base is actually getting pretty much swarmed by enemy heavy armor, so let's take some of that out, and we get some janky but nevertheless very fun dogfights between sentry fighters and thunderbolts down here. Now with more drones on the way, I feel comfortable enough throwing these against the enemy with no regard for losses, because, well, it's not Centauri lives that we are spending even when our mercenaries die, so that's all well and good. What official assets for the ground combat there are mainly come, of course, from the Babylon 5 Gropos role-playing game that came out, where I know existed at least a handful of tin figurines, but I have to admit that a lot of these I only ever knew from the in-game version here. Now, with our base rebuilding and back in action, we will get some more turrets up here to defend more effectively, so that our air force can start moving forward again and retaking the center of this map. Now it's very much the heaviest units of the Earth Alliance we have to worry about. The smaller tanks we can take out quickly enough, but even as we swarm with a bunch of drones, this heavy tank, it takes still a little while to get through there, and that little while is what can become deadly if we delay too much, because the enemy will just keep sending more of them in here. I think the next one is already on the way. So now that our first collection of forces that we tried to amass in the middle got destroyed, we are going to try and amass a bigger force here in the north and then try to get into the enemy base that way, which will make it harder for us to get to the generator, but we can have then a much easier picking against the command center of the enemy itself. The cinematic camera in these ground battles is a little bit more wonky as well compared to the space battles, but they did include many nice features like these beautiful cinematic runs of bombing runs, and that helps us take out some of these heavy forces as well. So, as we assign our battle groups and get our vanguard of drones going, we will start trying to clear out the center of this map. Maybe recapture the center point, and otherwise just getting enough of a force going that we can start penetrating the Earth Alliance base, actually. I do love the very narrow, long turrets that these heavy Earth Alliance tanks have. They look suitably sci-fi-ish, like a big prop that would have been built in an 80s action movie for some evil empire of some description. Almost reminiscent of the cockpit section of a Thunderbolt, the main hull of the tank there. So I wonder just how much of a cohesive design you can get with a full-on Earth Alliance army in here. Now, as good as these drones are, they are dreadfully squishy, so we will try to supplement them with some heavier forces, some of these beautiful walkers, and delegate the defense of our positions more to turrets so that we can send anything that moves towards the enemy here. I do love the resurgence that older RTS games have gotten in recent years, especially Dawn of War, which has multiple modifications going on, and looking at these always is a painful reminder of how advanced those modifications actually are, because they free up your camera, and I think about this every time I play Empire at War, and the camera is glued to the ground so closely that it's getting hard to get a proper overview of the battle. Nevertheless, we are getting a little bit of a grip here. Darth Vader is taking out one of our turrets, but if that's all the damage he's gonna do, we can deal with that well enough. Let's send some drones on top of him and concentrate on getting forces up in the middle here. Now, if we had included the Alliance of Light, which includes the Warlords, we could have much more law-appropriate uses of the forced choking and the forced lightning that we see in this mod. That is definitely another battle that I want to showcase eventually, a proper engagement between the forces of light and shadow, but that would exclude the Gropos and the Earth Alliance a little bit, so for this installment I want to stick with a more classic human perspective as well. Now, we've got a buttload of walkers coming in, lots and lots of drones, lots and lots of hired infantry. With that force at our back, we should be able to break through the defensive lines of the Earth Alliance, and just in case we don't, more reinforcements and a little bit of upgrades is on the way. Once again, the Earth Alliance doesn't take long to start sending armored vehicles against the center mass, but now that we've got some heavier forces in here, it shouldn't be all too difficult to deal with them, and even our infantry stays alive for long enough to actually survive and get to the base. So we are making progress, slowly but surely. Which I find quite fitting for the Centauri, right? They want to be methodical and ideally not sending everything in too quickly. Very much a force that should also be specializing in occupying territories rather than conquering them very well. Now in the center there is still a lone sentry fighter that is fighting a bunch of Star Furies here, but as long as they're bound dealing with it, we have our big column of armored walkers walking relatively securely, which is good. Gives us the opportunity to reach the enemy base in pretty good condition, and with our vanguard of drones going in there, we should be able to clear up an opening for our walkers to come in and then start wreaking havoc below the shield. And once we get that shield generator down, that will be a great start for any kind of bombardment. As you can see here, we can't just use our orbital force to take out the shield, unfortunately, so it will be done the old-fashioned way. Well, these drones do have a self-destruct ability, which can be useful to try and take out certain units. We'll try and see this against this Tesla turret here. Beautiful, and because we're mercenaries, we also get paid for that, so this is perhaps the most cost-effective fighting force in the galaxy of Babylon 5. Now, we do see and hear repeated messages that we are losing units at an alarming rate. We will need to send him some heavier reinforcements, but right now what we are losing is mostly the light drones at the front as they scout out the base for us, so our main bulk of forces is actually coming in here quite undisturbed, and with the last of the Gropos making their stand here, our weird alien walkers are slowly but surely getting into a position where they can start taking out the shield generator here. Our drones, of course, are relatively quick around, so in difficult terrain they can quickly provide some fire support, which is gonna be sorely needed, but the good news is our sentry fighters are now relatively unperturbed in the skies below the shield here, so any kind of reinforcements of the enemy will be quickly seen and dealt with, which opens things up for the last assault here. We are going to start loading up some infantry in a little transport back there, so we can get into an actual storming of the enemy command center, which we see right here. Now that shield's gone, we can also send some bombing runs in to deal with the last of the heavy tanks that the Earth Alliance has here, and let's hope for our Gropos that they will have a good evacuation plan, because now their base is largely overrun. It's only a matter of time for the rest to be taken out. With orbital bombardments going on and our mob-up crews clearing out any of the remaining enemy resistance, we are finally in a position where we can send in the final force. With drones inadvertently guarding the entire way there, we've opened up a proper corridor, and yeah, the Earth Alliance right now is scrambling to get any kind of force together that it can, but at this rate, the base is already as good as fallen. There we have our transport loaded up with everything. It can probably finish off this enemy tank here and then deliver our troops directly on top of the command center, which, of course, for this game we just have to destroy, but I do like to imagine that there's a little bit of a storming action going on. Our walkers prepping this site by bombarding it with missiles, so any representative of Earth Force in here should start thinking about surrendering relatively soon. And there go our mercenaries. Probably some Drazi in there if I had to guess. They seem like the right types to fight, even though probably not fighting for the cause if they have a choice. And there we have it. The Earth Alliance presence here is broken, and our forces will start continuing into a different area, and for a very quick jaunt into a different planet, we are going to take the next battle from the Earth Alliance side, just as long as it doesn't crash on us, which might be just a few minutes, but a few minutes are enough to showcase just how beautiful some of the in-game units of the Earth Alliance are. And what better place to take the Earth Alliance than on Tatooine, because, well, the only time we actually see deployment of the Gropos is on a desert kind of planet, so we might as well just redo the same for this modification as well. Now, in any Star Wars game, Tatooine is of course going to be one of the premier planets to showcase, and I think you can see this a little bit here, that this is a map that is alive with creepy crawlies, with wildlife, and a lot of atmospheric elements, even a Sarlacc pit in the middle there, which is really enjoyable to play as the Earth Alliance on, because, well, we have our proud and brave little troopers here that will be encountering all the dangers of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds out there. Now, we saw just how dangerous the Air Force of the Centauri can be, so we will start building a little bit of an air defense base around here, as our troops are out in the desert trying to secure some of these defense platforms. Or rather, mine shafts that we want to ideally build defense platforms around, because otherwise defending them is going to be quite difficult. Unfortunately, none of our Gropos get to ride any of these beasts, so no mounted cavalry in this universe. Instead we have to fight some of these Centauri mercenaries, and you can see they are very, very quick to dispatch any and all Gropos infantry with their little grenades that they throw. Luckily, our infantry did manage to capture this landing zone, so we will send in some armored vehicles, which will turn the tide quite quickly here. Earth Alliance shuttles coming in, deploying these little scouting tanks. And that should give us a good enough opportunity to clear out and hold this mine shaft here just as soon as we got the economy going to actually build some infrastructure here. Now down to the south, everything is looking fine and secure, but just in case we need to have like a rapid response force, we can invest in one of our beautiful little helicopters. And we can see here with some vehicle support, holding this landing zone is going to be a much easier job than infantry trying to do it on its own. You can also see you can build some auto defense cannons at a hut palace here if you want to go even deeper into mercenary works here. But for us, a strong economy is going to be the more important bit. But of course, getting on the good side with the locals is something that is very important in these kind of campaigns. That's ultimately the entire purpose of the Gropos deployment in the show as well. And we see the Centauri understand this and will make their own little allies if they get the opportunity. Which on Tatooine of course means little dudes, little scavengers in their big crawlers. Helicopters in sci-fi is something that I can never get enough of. I'm still absolutely in love with their portrayal in the Avatar shows, in the Avatar movies, and once again one of the elements that I love seeing for the Earth Alliance as well. It feels like such an amalgamation of things that feel right at home in Stargate, in Star Wars, in various books, right down to Starship Troopers. We see the mercenaries of the Centauri are kind of unhindered in walking into our base here, so we have to defend that a little bit better. Also, we built this research station from the original Empire faction, but they don't really do anything for us. There we see some of the energy fireballs fired off by the Shadow Infantry, but we push them back rather quickly and we'll have to deal with some of the Javas here. Which is rather unfortunate. It would be much greater if I could turn them to my side, but after starting to shoot at them, I don't know how persuasive the Gropos are going to be. And as we clear out this avenue, there is a wonderful path winding around the north here towards the enemy base, so we can start building a convoy in that direction. And to round it out, we will probably want to start pulling in a few more vehicles right there. We also get the option to build these light vehicle teams, which are very nice because they incorporate a little variety of units, including a troop transport, anti-air capability, which is exactly what we need to securely get across this map and into the enemy base for a successful assault. This would also be a good opportunity to deal with any kind of resource supply lines that the enemy has up here, but it doesn't look like they even bothered building something up here, which is all the better for us because it means we can quickly recapture this point with some of the boots on the ground. But just before we get that, unfortunately the game gives out. I would love to continue this matchup or others like it, but I might have to look into what exactly it is that makes especially playing as the Earth Alliance so unstable in this modification. For now though, this is enough of a little showcase of the Centauri Republic on the ground and, well, with a heavy heart, just an incomplete little showcase of the Earth Alliance as well. just enough to get us across 1 week and keep you entertained for just a little bit before we start talking about next week's episode, hopefully regularly with everybody back on board so that we can enjoy the heights of Babylon 5 in Season 2 as they come along, because the early parts of Season 2 are always a little bit of a rough patch for me at least, so I'm very much looking forward to things picking up from here on out. If you want to follow us and enjoy these next few episodes with us, you can find us, of course, on all the social media platforms at The Third Age Podcast, here on YouTube, and of course on Spotify for podcasters, Anchor, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you find your regular podcasting needs. We will hope to see you then.